I want to use these 5 minutes to talk a little bit about some of the ways that I've been working and some of the ways of doing the interdisciplinary work that I've been trying, or I've been working on cultivating. And so I'm going to begin with this sort of provocation from one of the pieces we were asked to read for our homework from the Environmental Humanities Journal, where the authors note that, EH in one sense is about, finding a conversational space for people from different subdisciplines, but they also note that on a more ambitious level, it could be about challenging these disciplinary fields of inquiry and functioning as a provocation to a more interdisciplinary set of interventions. So this is something I've been concerned with in my own work. That is, how do we do, let's get this started. How do we do really collaborative, interdisciplinary work, transdisciplinary work across disciplines that isn't just about information sharing necessarily, or sort of maybe micro collaborations, but really about changing perhaps the way we do our own work. So although Stephanie put me under environmental humanities and art, I'm doing a little bait and switch here, and actually I want to talk about feminist studies and its sort of potential to create this sort of radically transdisciplinary space that I think can be a really fruitful and fecund place from which to do environmental humanities. And to borrow the metaphor that Stephanie actually already used, I think of the feminist studies sort of area, a post-discipline, as it's been called, as a really great dinner party host for these kinds of environmental humanities projects, not least because there's obviously a very strong tradition of feminist work that has fed into the environmental humanities that's actually not even always acknowledged, which is something we were just talking about at our table that we can talk about more later. But quite, I think, very importantly, one of the things is that feminist studies, or gender studies, as it's also sometimes called, isn't a disciplinary category itself. It has a lot of, it's been built on being transdisciplinary. It's been very interested in philosophical critiques of a humanist subject, a very strong commitment to the relationship between social justice and interhuman justice issues and interspecies justice issues, not as parallel questions, but as questions that come out of the same sort of ideological and philosophical, cosmological sort of commitments. So my work, although it's specific, also in a more sort of, collaborative vein, has been about thinking how the feminist studies field can be a really important host for environmental humanities work. And then what I want to do in just 1 or 2 minutes is talk about one specific method that I've been cultivating, and it's not mine, it's been going on for a while, primarily within arts communities though. And I'm thinking this is a great thing that we need to bring more specifically into theory and science communities as well. And that's the idea of the incubator, right? So the idea of collaborative incubators where you take a common place or a theme, you bring together a bunch of practitioners that come from diverse backgrounds, with diverse sort of disciplinary training and investments, and you stage an opportunity to really think experimentally and collaboratively through a set of questions. Ideally, and in the examples I'm going to give, with the participation of the community in which this is happening. So one example I can give of this sort of method or approach in the environmental humanities has been really strongly cultivated in Western Australia in Oren Katz's Symbiotica Center. It's a bioarts center, but for example, one of the projects they did was around Lake Clifton in Western Australia, which is both environmentally, historically, and scientifically a very significant site, and a very diverse group, primarily of artists, came together for intense collaboration to think through, as they say, this site as both a location and a metaphor. To think about the sort of microcosmic peak, it's a microcosmic peak rather, into the broader issues of ecology and life itself. So we had sound art, I was there, sound artists, sculptors, more traditional painters, people working in indigenous art traditions, scientists, biologists who also work in art forms, together rethinking what it means to be in this place at this moment in time, in the sort of broader planetary ecological context. So this is the sort of idea that I've been trying to work with. Next week I'm going to a field trip, which will do a similar sort of thing up in very far north of Finland, in Lapland. It's sponsored by the Finnish BioArt Society, and how it differs a little bit from the Lake Clifton project is that it's a little bit even more interdisciplinary, bringing in theorists. I mean, I myself am primarily a theorist and a writer, but working together again with bioartists, scientists who actually are just scientists, working on things like metagenomics, epigenetics, these sorts of questions, local populations, biologists, photographers, sculptors, to think through the question of deep time in this specific place. So again, I guess the idea is that through contact and experimental collaboration, we can think through and try out different ways of thinking about certain ecological concepts. In this particular case, deep time. And then that just leads me, I suppose, to a similar then project that I'm starting with some colleagues in Linköping in Sweden, in Östergötland. We're around a lake that is a very significant, again, historically, economically, culturally, recreationally, in those terms, site around Linköping, where we're going to be bringing together then, again, a little bit more interdisciplinary, not only artists and environmental scientists, but specifically theorists, and people more from these sorts of backgrounds in the environmental humanities, to think through what this lake means and could mean, both again as a metaphor and a microcosm for broader ecological questions around resilience, sustainability, the time of our ecologies, Anthropocene, these sorts of questions. So I know that's a very quick look, but I guess my idea in presenting this method as opposed to a specific project or idea is that I've also been thinking with the invitation to attend here about how the digital humanities could also be a strong partner in this sort of thing. It's not really, I've not really worked a lot with digital humanities technologies. I'm a real pen and paper kind of gal, so I'm quite interested to see how those sorts of platforms and opportunities could really enrich this sort of method that is actually quite locally based. You know, it's very strongly based in a feminist concept of situated knowledge. And so how we can sort of take those very local combustions that come out of this collaborative work and translate them into a broader, perhaps globally interconnected sort of platform of knowledge. I suppose I can just also end on my last 30 seconds saying that in my dreams, I'm also thinking of doing this out on the east coast of Canada, where I have the perfect site, the scientists, the space, the people, the local population, just need the money. But again, it's a very sort of in a very local ecology on Graminan Island, working with the whale and seabird research station there, and the local fishers, and the local sort of tourist operators and things like that. Again, thinking through particular questions of water and weather in an Atlantic ecology. So I think I'm going to stop there, but I'm really interested, you know, as the weekend progresses, if you have ideas about this methods or this sort of method, or have things you could add. And I'm just going to end with one plug. That's a book that's coming out in a month that I just have to say I think is really an interesting textual version of the sort of interdisciplinarity I'm talking about. It's a book that's about 3 years, 4 years in the making, that includes like Giselle's work as an artist, poets like Jeanette Armstrong, Dawn Mackay, but then also a very broad interdisciplinary spectrum of environmental humanities thinkers on the question of water. So again, revolving around a theme rather than a discipline to sort of collaboratively think through what it could mean to us and beyond humans as well. that's all I'm going to say, and thank you very much.